was at this church and staying in this parsonage. There was no power, no electricity, no heat in the building. It was very cold. It was the winter, and I was asleep. And in the middle of the night, the room lit up. It got very bright, and I thought, well, it must be morning already.
A street lamp or something?
Well, I thought it was sunrise because it was so bright, you know. And this bright light just shined in the room, completely took the presence in the room. And I began to look, and I said, well, who's there? And as soon as I said, who's there, the light kind of peeled back, so to speak, and there was Jesus standing there with this light around him, just brilliant. And he began to speak to me and told me that I would be a prophet. And I didn't understand what that meant. I mean,
you didn't know what the word prophet even meant?
Well, maybe like a psychic or something, you know, something that I had heard about, you know, maybe on television, but to have an understanding of a prophet that God would use, no, I really didn't. Well, what happened was he began to show me scriptures. He took me to my Bible and showed me scriptures that I was to follow with my life. And then in early 1980, around August, I went to sleep this night, just about like any other night. I want to tell you some specifics so you'll know. I was not intoxicated. I was not under the influence of any hallucinogenic drugs, although there had been some times I had smoked marijuana and had drank in my life. The night that I had this dream, I did not go to bed in a condition of stupor or, intoxicated or anything like that. I fell asleep, and it was one of those types of nights when you kind of can tell you're falling asleep. You kind of, drift off and you know you're just about asleep. Just as soon as I fell into sleep, this dream began to start. It started with a very, very, very loud noise. Right at that moment of hearing this, I was given the ability, again, I'll share with you some things that seem to be very chronological in how this dream worked out. And yet, in some places, I can't tell you specific time frames because it was almost as though I was interjected into different situations without the understanding of time moving along. Some things were just very panoramic. It was just a wide, big picture that I saw. But at this point of the dream, I was given the opportunity to see kind of from the heavens looking down on the earth. And what I saw was that I was able to see, the globe was kind of out here like this, and I was able to see very clearly many cemeteries and graveyards. Then I was brought very close to many of these graveyards, and what I saw was a very unusual thing to me. It was that the ground was breaking open. Literally, the dirt was breaking open kind of violently, and people were coming out of the graves. I'll tell you that as a Catholic, I prayed many, many times that I believed in the resurrection of the dead. But I don't really believe at that point, in the dream especially, that I was persuaded that that would actually happen. I know now that that's what I saw. I saw dead people resurrected from the graves. The condition that they came out was very unusual. And the other thing that was unusual is that one cemetery plot headstone would have a person come out of the dirt, and one next to it would not. It seemed to be a kind of not just random, but kind of a categorized launching, so to speak, of these people out of the dirt. Again, it was very violent. It was almost as though the dirt was receiving a small explosion or something and breaking open. And I literally saw dirt flying. And I saw this all over the globe. It wasn't just in one area. It wasn't just in, say, the United States. It was all over. And when people would begin to come out, their appearance, two things about their appearance first astounded me. The first thing was that the clothes they were wearing seemed to be like a choir robe. They were kind of like a long dress, so to speak, a cloak almost hanging off them. But in the middle of the day, it was like those outfits that entertainers wear when they're under the lights, and the lights, key in on them, and the sequins kind of make the light just shoot off and they glimmer. These people came out in the middle of the day glimmering. Their outfits and their person was brighter than the sun. I wish I could explain that to you, other than I could see the brightness of these people coming out. Men
although they had these robes on, appeared to be very, very masculine. I always used to think that, those robes I had to wear when I graduated from school kind of looked kind of feminine, but these things that these people were wearing were masculine, and yet when women were resurrected, they looked very feminine. Again, I'm going to give you the dream exactly as I saw it. Some things I wish sounded more exciting, and other things I wish were just a bit tamer, but I'm going to give it to you exactly as I saw it. These people that came out, it was difficult for me to explain this over the years. Older people would come out with the appearance that they were old, but they weren't old. You could tell that they had lived a full life, maybe 80 years, 75 years, something like that. But say, for instance, their hair that was lost was back again. They looked mature, but they didn't look aged. Okay, young people. I saw a lot of young people resurrected, and although they looked very young, they weren't very young. There was a maturity about them. I wish again I could clearly define how this appeared during the dream. All of a sudden, the people that came out, they just disappeared. I wish I could tell you where I saw them go. I don't know. I don't know if they were taken and hidden somewhere. I don't know if they were taken in the clouds, because I never saw them go up. I never saw them go away. They just vanished.
This dream started, I was able to understand the starting point, the time it went through, and the ending point. It was a dream about pretty much the end of the earth that I could understand at the time. Halfway through the dream, I woke up frightened, terribly frightened, and just in a literal pool of perspiration in the bed.
Did you tell your wife about it?
Yes, I did, and she said I was having a nightmare.
Well, you were, from what you told me.
It was very frightening. I woke up, and I wasn't quite sure really what to do. I was quite a rebellious person at that point in my life. So praying, doing something like that, it wasn't one of my practices. But when I got up and began to pace the living room floor, I really felt a strong sense that I needed to read the Bible. Well, I didn't read the Bible.
But I thought you were a practicing Catholic.
Well, I was, but I didn't read the Bible.
Okay, so you had a Bible at least.
Well, I actually, it was about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I went out to my garage and began to look through all the books that I had in boxes, and I found a Bible and ended up bringing it into the house, sat down in a rocking chair, and part of my habit is to always flip from a magazine from the back. Mm-hmm. And so I flipped to the back of the Bible and started at a portion called the Apocalypse. And I thought, well, I'll read this. I mean, I don't know what this means. Never had read it. Began to read maybe 3, 4, 5 chapters.
Is this like the Book of Revelation?
Book of Revelation.
Okay.
It didn't say that in my Bible, though.
Okay.
So that was pretty foreign to me.
It didn't say it in my Bible either. I come from the Jewish background, but that's okay.
Well, I wasn't quite sure what it was. I really wasn't sure what apocalypse even meant. But after a brief time of reading, I fell back asleep. I fell asleep in the chair, and the dream started exactly at the point it stopped. And from that point, I met an individual who began to tell me about Jesus. And, he began to tell me what had been going on because there was chaos. The police were no longer the law enforcement officers, but it was more like a military. I saw some military vehicles that recently I've seen now that I didn't know were in existence that now are.
You saw them in your dream, and they didn't even exist at that time.
Exactly. Saw them in the dream, didn't exist. At least to my knowing, I had never saw them in any pictures or anything. So what had happened is this man began to express to me the plan for a person to be converted to faith in Christ. And so I agreed with him, and then he began to expound to me what was going on in the world, because it was almost undescribable, the chaos.
Hold that thought. We're going to be back in a moment. We're going to find out exactly what he saw for the last days of the world. Don't go away. Be right back. Hi, Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. I know you came back because Ken Peters, he had a dream, knew nothing about the Bible, but in this dream he saw the last days of the world. And he saw vehicles that didn't even exist back then. It's just recently that these have come on the scene. But there was chaos going on, you said. Tell me, pick up from there.
The chaos, again, there was no governmental covering, so to speak. There didn't seem to be that security that we sense, with our government watching over us, the parameters that they provide for us. That was completely removed. Again, there weren't local law enforcement agencies, but it was more of a kind of a military or militia. It seemed like martial law. People were greatly frightened. One thing I remember that I will never forget was that little babies had just disappeared for a period of time in this dream. They were gone. No little babies from, newborn.
Where did they go? Where did all the babies go? They just disappeared.
They were just gone. Yeah, they had just disappeared. Many mothers were very frightened. A lot of toddlers had disappeared. And then a period of time into the dream, people began to have children again. And I knew that this was the end, even though I didn't know anything about the end. Inside of me, I knew this was the end. The end was at the door. Began to see buildings in the city that I was a part of at that time, where I lived, that are now there. Triangular glass building. The way the monetary structure was set up, only certain people could make transactions, business transactions. That people had to have a mark on their hand to conduct business, to buy food at grocery stores. It was all controlled.
You never read this in the Bible?
Never.
This is in the Bible?
Never.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, this was very strange because people were controlled, literally. That's what it was. They were controlled. And there was a great sense that they were being watched almost, So what had happened was, again, like I said, this man led me to faith in Jesus. I began to work with him to try to spread this news to others. And the thing that really impressed into my thinking was that he said that the Christian people, those who had faith in Jesus, any who had faith in Jesus, were taken, and they were taken to heaven. And that was such an empty feeling to me.
Was that where the babies went?
I assume so, Sid. I believe so.
Okay,
I do believe so. So the words that he said were so real to me that I received them. I really embraced them as truth, and I knew inside of me somehow that these were truth.
So you were left. You were left there in this chaos.
Yes.
What else went on?
Well, after a short period of time, we began to kind of help these children. Many children were abandoned. Much fear was working through people's hearts. A lot of people were abandoning their children. People were committing suicide on a regular basis. It was very frightening times. So we began to try to help people that were in desperate straits. And eventually we were captured by the militia. And we were told to stop doing what we were doing. And at that point, we continued to do it. Then they took us in again and interrogated us and told us that if we didn't stop, there would be severe penalties. They never at first were very clear about what the penalties would be, other than they would just be severe. And at that time, we just continued to say, well, this is what we believe God has called us to do, and we can't stop doing this. The one thing that seemed strange was I didn't notice any religious freedoms for any people groups, none. Eventually, they took us into this room, did further interrogation, and we pretty much decided we were not going to follow the directives that they were giving us. And then they finally led us into this huge corridor in this building. It seemed to be 50, maybe 100 yards long with all these people lined up. We weren't sure what was going on, but they would take a person every few minutes and they would go into this room. And then the line would start getting closer and closer. Eventually, we realized that they were executing these people in this line. The door had opened enough.
You were in the line?
I was in the line. Yes.
My goodness, how would you like to have been in that line? How would you like to have been? What would you have done? You sure would have prayed a lot, I imagine. Hi, Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. We left off with Ken Peters, and he was having a dream, knew nothing about the Bible. And in this dream, he's in a line, and he's headed towards, was it execution?
Execution.
You knew it.
Yes. Well, what had happened after many people had progressed through the line is that the door was left open. I don't know why, but the door was left open, and we began to see what was going on. The gentleman I had talked about and we were in this line proceeding forward, and began to see people being beheaded, literally losing their lives. And great fear came on me when I saw that happening, because I wasn't sure what was going on behind that door.
Listen, something be wrong with you if great fear didn't come on you.
Oh, Sid, the fear was indescribable. It felt like my body was having the extreme chills and, almost beside myself. And I began to be afraid that I would deny my faith in Jesus, that I wouldn't be able to go through with this. I was petrified, literally. And I began to just cry out. I can't tell you that I began to pray. It was more of a crying out in desperation, because, I was fearful that if I denied Jesus, then what would happen to me, To me, it was more real than the death itself, I was more frightened of the denial, So I cried out, and I just basically said, Lord, please help me. That was a real simple prayer. But at that moment...
Not a classic prayer, but an honest prayer.
Yeah, honest from the heart.
Right.
So as soon as I said that, Sid, I felt someone touch my shoulder, and I looked back behind me, because when my shoulder was touched, I just felt warmth go through my whole body. Again, I was almost, my teeth were almost chattering because of I was chilled almost with this fear, great fear. And when I had the warmth run through me, I looked back about like this, and it was Jesus standing behind me. And, a million thoughts could run through your mind if you could explain them in a matter of milliseconds, but I couldn't, except that great peace just flooded me. And then he spoke to me, looked right into my eyes, spoke to me and said, "Fear not, for death will never hold you." And beknownst to me what those words meant, I was coming up to experience death. And just a few moments later, the individual that was ahead of me was executed, and then it was my turn. And they asked me, it was strange because they could tell the people that were going to crack. They could tell, and there were some that left the line,
What do you mean by crack?
Just
deny the Lord?
Deny, yes. Deny the Lord, yes. And so I think they had noticed that in me previously in the line. And so they asked me again, and I said, no, Jesus is Lord, and I can't deny faith in him. And so the executioner, they put me in the position to be killed, and as soon as there was a sword, as soon as the sword touched my neck, the moment it touched me, I was gone. And there I was with the Lord looking upon the whole scene. It was phenomenal. Instantly in his presence, away from what I was experiencing in death, and witnessing all of it. Immediately at that point, the executioner took off his mask and said, I will not kill any more of these people.
And then did you wake up?
And then I woke up.